Questions 1 through 10 are based on the passage, adapted from Midnight at the Dragon Cafe by Judy Fong Bates. In the middle of the summer, Charlotte and I rode farther than we had ever been before. We came upon a dirt road that descended at a steep pitch. On one side of the road were massive boulders covered in a green velvet moss. On the other side, a farmer's field. I wanted to turn back, but Charlotte's eyes gleamed with a sudden energy. She hopped on her bike and took off down the hill, expecting me to follow. At first, I was cautious, using my brakes to slow my speed, but gradually released them and felt myself soar as I sped faster and faster. When I reached the bottom, my arms were trembling. Charlotte smiled from the side of the road where she had watched my descent. I wheeled my bike over and laid it down next to hers. I sat on the ground to catch my breath, but Charlotte stepped off the side of the road onto what appeared to be a path. It started between two boulders and followed a line of electrical poles into the woods. She seemed to know where she was going and called for me to follow. I shook my head and moved to the cool off in the shade. Charlotte scrambled up the path and disappeared. I expected her to return right away to tell me what she had discovered, but when some time had passed and she still hadn't come back, I grew worried, and I decided to seek her out. I climbed up the rocky incline that started by the edge of the road and found myself surrounded by more huge boulders that looked like a giant's teeth pushing out of the ground. I called out Charlotte's name. There was no answer. I walked farther and saw tall, leafy trees all around me. I called for her again. My heart was pounding. This time there was a distant answer. "Over here, Annie." I followed the voice, climbing higher and higher until I came to what appeared to be a precipice overlooking farmers' fields below. Charlotte was nowhere to be seen. I walked as close to the edge as I dared and looked down. The cliff followed a meandering line, and in some places it jutted out and cut in again, like the profile of a person with a nose, mouth, and chin. "Charlotte?" I called again. "Where are you?" I looked all around me, but still couldn't see her. "Down here, climb down here." I walked a few steps toward the sound and saw a place where the cliff separated into deep cracks leading far below. I crouched and looked in between the rocks and saw Charlotte grinning up at me. "I found a cave. Come down. See, there are places to put your hands and feet." She pointed at grooves in the rocks that formed a natural ladder. I started to lower myself into the crevice, noticing that it felt much cooler between the rocks. Charlotte was waiting for me when I reached the bottom. The crevice was wider there, opening up to a rocky ledge, and I followed Charlotte for a few steps until she took me into a cave, an open space with a smooth floor and concave walls, a round room in the middle of the cliff. I sat and leaned against the wall and caught my breath. I felt the quiet all around me.